Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Dan Clay for being here with us today. It's such a treat to have you here. Thank you all again for coming to our virtual banned book club meeting for Becoming a Queen by Dan Clay. Okay, so we have a few quick things to get to before we start our open discussion about the book and a Q&A with Dan Clay. We are going to do a check-in where we share our name and pronouns. We are going to share a bit about the Guilford Green Foundation, run through a quick land acknowledgement, go through community agreements for our discussion, and then we will go right into the discussion, Q&A, and check out for the evening. Okay, so check-in first and foremost. I just asked for y'all to share your name and your pronouns if you are comfortable with that. I will go first. My name is Maddie, and my pronouns are primarily they, them, and I am the program intern. I'm also a lecturer at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. All right, who wants to go next?
I will go. My name is Dara, and I am the program manager with Guilford Green Foundation and LGBTQ Center. I will popcorn it to Susan. My pronouns are she, they.
Susan, do you mean me? Does it say Susan on there? Can you all hear me?
We can.
We hear you clearly, yes.
My name is Susan Shankle. I go by Sue. That's why I was like, huh? My pronouns are she and her. And I have been a social worker for 40 years. I'm a Greensboro resident, and I love this book.
I'll go next because Sue and I know each other mostly from the internet, but we've met one time in New York City. So what a treat, and what a treat in general to be here. I'm just so honored. It was like a dream to do something like this when I was writing. So, but my name is Dan Clay, and I use he, him pronouns. And I'll pass it to Nathan.
Hi, my name is Nathan Crabtree. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the development manager at Guilford Green Foundation and LGBTQ Center. So come to bingo and give us your donations. Hi, bye. Heather, you want to go?
Sure. My name is Heather. I use she, they pronouns. I have been to bingo before. So me and my husband have been, and I am currently a school-based mental health case manager.
Who do you popcorn it to, Heather?
Sorry, my screen froze for a second. Elena, has she gone yet?
Ellie, you want to go?
Oh yeah. My name's Ellie, she, her.
And it looks like Sarah has joined. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sarah from Frederick, Maryland, and I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, great. I think we got everyone. All right, we can go ahead and on. So I think mostly everyone here knows what Guilford Green is, but just in case, I'll share our mission real quick. Guilford Green Foundation and LGBT Center, GGF for short, creates unity through programming and philanthropy that advances equality and inclusion for LGBTQ communities. Our vision is that we envision a greater Greensboro with a thriving LGBTQ community that elevates all. You can learn more on our website, www.guilfordgreenfoundation.org. If we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, but we're most active on Facebook and Instagram. Okay, so since we start a little bit late, I won't read the full land acknowledgement, but I will say hi in Guilford Green Foundation. Do recognize that the land that we are working on, that we are holding this space together today, is stolen land, and it is important to recognize the longstanding history of escape, forced removal, and resettlement that has brought all of us to reside on this land. So now community agreements. These were, I believe, Dara, did you write these community agreements? Do you want to run through them?
Sure, just universal common agreements that bring us together, speak from our hearts, listen with our hearts, speak and listen with respect, say enough, honor privacy, bringing our best selves to the conversation, definitely enjoy it, and be creative and imaginative in this moment, as I'm sure that we will hold questions and wonderings and observations for Dan because of his brilliant creativity.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dara. Now, that sounds good to everybody, right? All right,
Love that.
we'll continue then. Okay, so now we get into the fun stuff. We're going to talk about Dan and talk about his amazing book, Reign of Queen. This is his debut novel. So I'm going to run through Dan's introduction real quick. Dan Clay is a writer and drag queen thrilled to be making his debut as a novelist with the Until now, he focused on spreading love and positivity online through his drag persona, Carrie Dragshaw. His writing as Carrie has been featured in hundreds of magazines, newspapers, and television shows, from Cosmo to People to Watch, What Happens Live, and his TED Talk on being your whole self details his firsthand experience with the healing power of drag. Dan graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in philosophy and went on to get an MBA from Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. When he's not writing, he works for a climate change nonprofit and a New York-based branding agency. He lives in New York. You can connect with Dan on Instagram at Dan_Clay or online at writerdanclay.com. Okay, Dan, welcome. Did I miss anything in that introduction? Is there anything else that you want to add there?
No, I'm just so thrilled to be here and so honored that you've read the book.
That's so sweet. Okay, well, I'm really honored to have read this book and have this experience with you right now. So thank you so much again for being here.
Okay. Oh, and I guess one flavor to add is that I have North Carolina family. So my sister lives in Charlotte and my parents live in Pinehurst.
That's
So
great.
yes, so I go to North Carolina a lot.
Oh, that's awesome. You should come visit us sometime.
I know, I would love that. I'll be coming in not too long. My mom, if my mom gets her way, it'd be tomorrow. But yeah, no, my dog likes North Carolina much more than New York City.
Dan, just wait a couple months. It's so hot, we're baking like potatoes. I'm just
Right. But the crazy thing is it's hot everywhere now. It's like Ohio is like Florida all of a sudden. But anyway, that's for our climate change conversation.
have, but not today.
Yeah.
Okay, well, okay, thank you so much for sharing that, Dan. All right, so I'm going to go on and read a short description of the book that we are meeting for today, just in case somebody didn't get to finish it all the way. Becoming a Queen follows the life, love, and losses of high schooler turned Bible drag sensation Mark Davis. Only Mark hadn't put on a dress for the talent show. It was a joke. Other guys did it too. When his boyfriend saw Mark in the dress, everything changed. And now, fresh on the heels of high school heartbreak, Mark has given up on love. Maybe some people are just too much for this world, too weird, too wild, too feminine, too everything. Thankfully, his older brother, Eric, always knows what to say to keep Mark from spinning into self-loathing. Be yourself, your full sequiny self. But Mark starts to notice signs that his perfect older brother has problems of his own. When the source of Mark's strength suddenly becomes the source of his greatest pain, the path back to happiness seems impossible. Searching for a way out, Mark slips into a dress to just briefly become someone else, live a different life. The escape, however, becomes an unexpected outlet for his pain, a path to authentic connection and a provocation to finally see other people as fully as he wants to be seen. So through all the glitz and the glam, at its core, this novel is a coming-of-age story. It's a story about a young person finding himself through three intersecting outlets, which I have listed to the right of the Becoming cover: drag and performance, grief, and love and friendship. I listed these themes because Mark cements his identity as a queen only after the profound loss of his brother, and drag gives him a safe space to express his grief. But Mark wouldn't have the strength to be his most authentic self if not for the unconditional support of his boyfriend Ezra, as well as his two best friends, Crystal and Damon. The joy of drag, the intense trauma of loss, and the triumph of vulnerability and intimacy come together to create a really warm, deeply kind, empathetic mosaic that is becoming. So, how I figured we would structure this conversation, just in case we need a bit of structure, is that I have the themes listed out in several different slides here, and I have a quote that points to each of these major themes. However, I want to leave it open to discussion. I don't want this to be limiting. I just want it to be a tool in the toolbox for our discussion today. So I'm going to return to the previous slide and just ask, what was everyone's general impression of the book? Is there anything that somebody wants to bring to the stage right now?
I'll go. Are you shocked? Okay, I'm gonna try not to, the agreements, right? The agreements. I am a 51-year-old gay man who came out later in life. And so coming of age books about boys in high school who found love are hard for me, because when I read, Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe in red, white, and royal blue and things like that, I sometimes I can't do it because I have this longing of what it could have been like. So that was there a little bit for me, as it is with a lot of these other coming of age novels. And we can't wait for whenever Becoming a Queen is becoming a feature film, Henny. Like, we got it, like the three trio, that's going to be the next one. But that was sort of the stage that was set for me going in, is like, I can read a story. And actually I listened, and we need a Grammy for the audiobook. Oh my God. Especially in the chapters after Eric. Like, it was, I read some, I listened some, but I was glad to say that there were so many other themes besides, and really, like, young love was really not the main part of it. So that helped me to move through and move beyond my own sort of, like, sometimes sadness when reading about these kinds of stories.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Nathan. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share. I just realized I'd like to look at everyone, and it's a little awkward, so I'll stop that for now. But Susan, was there something you wanted to say?
Me? Yes. Dan, your ability to do that alliteration thing that I learned about in high school is Google, you Google, no, you Google, Google woo, you Google woo. I wrote it down, Google woo, because I just thought it was so funny. I know that you've always wanted to be, and obviously from your Instagram account, you are a writer. You were a writer before you wrote this book. But this is different. And I just want to tell you how happy I am for you and how great I think it is. And I also want to ask, did your mom know that you called her a crazy punch bowl lady ahead of time? Did you warn her?
I did, because she is not that mom, but she has a rooster themed kitchen. And so what I warned her about is that just because you and this mom both have a rooster themed kitchen, do not then think that you are her for the rest of the book. I just couldn't make up a new kitchen. So,
Of course not.
yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wondered if you just sprung it on her or if you said, Mom, you know,
Yeah.
like
No,
Alanis
my mom is
Morissette.
like a very, very mellow. If she were a punch bowl server, she would be a very mellow, hands-off punch bowl woman.
And not a crazy punch bowl lady.
No.
Okay. And I also wanted to ask about, are there any, is there any movie talking to, and if, you know, I'm a therapist, and if that's confidential, I'm used to asking nosy questions. I do it all day long. If that's too nosy, just say so, but
No, I mean, I went out to dinner with someone who thought it would be a good idea, and he's produced some movies, so he's having conversations. And we'll see. My understanding is that world is very unpredictable and erratic, and yeah, a lot of meetings and all of this. So, I mean, I'm so in awe that it is a book that anything beyond that would be just kind of would quite flip
It's
my script even more.
not just a book, Dan. It's a fabulous book. Thank you. Thank you.
World to me.
Yes, yes.
Google Blue was one of my favorite scenes to write, so. And I made into a sort of a funny thing I was definitely not out in high school. And I came out, I think when I was like 24 or something. So not late, but not high school. And while I was writing it, I had to temper my resentment of these children. I was like, oh, wouldn't that be nice to just have somebody love you for who you are? It's like, no, this is good. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that feeling.
But also, my straight high school crush's name was Damien. So, I mean, not that there wasn't, I mean, they were just friends. That wasn't a
Right,
crush,
right,
but
right,
like,
right.
there were all these like little connections, and
Yeah.
looking
Oh, I
back,
love
it's like,
that.
oh, I was in love with my Damien. So
Yes, it's a great name.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love the philosophical brilliance that's interwoven. You know, it's clear to me, Dan, that you're a philosophy buff because of, you know, it made me remember when I'm a philosophy nerd, though I was never a philosophy major, but I do love Foucault, right? So the fact that you were able to, while you're telling this coming of age story, amidst the themes of drag and performance and grief, that you were able to lift up it's cool to be smart while being queer, and that a big thinker like Foucault matters, and that you even mentioned people like Roald Dahl, who was a racist. I had completely forgotten about James and the Giant Peach, and then go on to call J.K. Rowling out, to me, makes your book forever relevant, and not only now, but next. So that when young people who are looking to pick up a book where they see themselves and they can turn the mirror on themselves, they will learn so many lessons on top of what Sue said about alliteration.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that
You
makes
know,
me
so-
so fulfilled. And as one might expect, I had a like formative moment studying Foucault, being like, oh my God, we're not inventing this? Like, they were talking about this then? And then it also made me angry because it's like, wait, they were talking about this then, and this is where we are? Like, what happened? But yeah, I definitely wanted to just, you know, drop little seeds of, you know, there is a whole history of this. And, you know, I'm a bit more of like a kind of, I have intense views on things. And I think, one of the things that, like, when people like pat themselves on the back of like, oh, how much progress we've made. I just wanted to drop some thinkers in there who are like, have we really, if we have, yes. So I love that. And that because it is a young adult book. And I just remember being so consumed by school when I was a young adult. And obviously, you have crushes and you have other fascinations, but you also have a chemistry test tomorrow. And no matter how in love you are, if you're a certain person, you're going to study for that chemistry test, and you're going to kind of think in terms of that chemistry test or that ACT prep or all of these things. And so when I was writing, I messaged one of my high school teachers, and I was like, can you just tell me the names of like, what would be the curriculum, like go to a average junior on like the college track. What's the chemistry book they have? What's the history book they have? So I got all of these textbooks to kind of, okay, what's going to be in their heads right now? Okay, molecules and all these things to, be in the school of it. Because there are amazing young adult movies and books that are beautiful and exciting love stories. But then you're like, are these kids in school? Do they ever... What, don't they have a pop quiz to be stressed about? So I love hearing you say that, because it was like a very intentional wanting to make sure that these kids cared about school, they were going to school, they thought about school, they got excited about good grades, and like it's cool to be smart.
It was all of that for me. Thank you so much for writing the book. Thank you so much.
And I didn't have to fight for much, but keeping that Foucault reference in there. Not a lot of people thought that was something they could say.
Turns out.
I know. Thank you. It's delightful.
Dan, it's really fantastic to hear about your writing process a little bit. And just, getting the textbooks and looking through them is so fascinating. And I love the lengths that you went to immerse yourself into the brain of a high school boy. I love that. But you also write so authentically, or so with so much empathy about, addiction and loss and much more heavier topics. So I'm wondering, what was your process like when tackling those more sensitive issues?
Yeah, yes. That's such a beautiful question, and thank you. So I have been sober for 17 years. So I have personal experience on the topic. And I remember, and when you get sober really young, you can kind of like do the math of, the things that were happening at that time to encourage a 21-year-old to stop drinking. It's like, I just am now allowed to, and I'm going to stop. But I remember when I was in high school, we would have these classes, health class or something, and they would tell these stories to you that were all so extreme. They would tell like the story of like a guy with a tube in his throat because he smoked so much, and you'd be a like 13-year-old and you're like, oh my God, it's so lame. Nobody gets a tube in their throat. And I remember when I was growing up, this guy, we learned a story in health class of a guy who got too drunk and he fell in a frozen river. I was like, oh God. And me and my friends even made fun of it. We were like, oh my God, I bet one person fell in a frozen river when he was in 1970. And they've been telling that story ever since. Well, then my life started going on the wrong path, and I started doing things, and things started happening to me that were those crazy things you read about in health class. And I metaphorically became the guy that fell in a frozen river. I'm like, oh my God, this does happen to real people. And so part of the impetus of the book was to kind of write something that not in the way that health class does of like, you know, don't drink or you're gonna die, but in a way that just told a story of like, this hits people and it's not their fault. And you don't know why, and you don't know who, but it can hit you. And so that was like a big part of the why of, you know, why do I want to add another book to the world? It was kind of like, I just kind of want to like reach back into those kids that are in that health class with the tube in your throat guy and be like, you know, yeah, that probably isn't going to be you, but things that extreme can happen to you and your friends. And then and it's kind of how the book very, very, very ends, with Mark's realization that these things happen to a lot of people. And my life has had, like, if you were to ask me, oh, have you had a tragic, my life has been great and everybody's happy and we're all great. But then when you actually sit and think like, oh yes, this person very close to me and this family member and this, and specifically in my case, alcoholism and addiction has been a beast of just, you know, taking people out left and right who matter to me. And so it was that part of the story was really always the core of it, and wanting to tell that part really true and wanting to be in it, not do, you know, a lot of like, it's common in books and movies where like something tragic happens and then and 6 months later, but I kind of wanted to investigate like, how do you get through it? Like the second after it happened, like how do you have breakfast the next day? How do you start going back to work? How do you have meaningless conversations about the weather? Like actually, how do you re-engage in life? Because so many people have to. So it really is, for me, everything else, the love story and the draft, everything else is kind of what gets him out of that and what, you know, is part of the healing process of that. But to me, it's 1000% like a book about addiction and the viciousness and just indiscriminate nature of addiction and alcoholism, and wanting to, not in a like school special kind of way, but wanting to tell a story that maybe stuck with a younger person, that like, okay, this is something that we need to be on the lookout for. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was such a lovely response. I mean, just the perfect response. And yeah, I see so much tenderness in everything that you're saying, and also that shows through in the work. I would say like every single character in Becoming a Queen, they feel alive. They feel like they have their intrinsic humanity respected. You know, they make good decisions and they make bad decisions. None of them are flat stock characters. So yeah, that's just me gushing. But if anybody else wants to chime in about what Dan was just discussing or about any other topics, go ahead.
I do feel like there are a couple of kids I have right now actually who it's so hard for them. Like this book really hit with like one of the kids I have, because she like feels guilty sometimes. Her grandma passed away and she'll feel guilty for like being interested in relationships at school, or like being stressed about a test, and then she'll go back to being guilty and saying, I don't think about her anymore. And it's like, well, she would want you to live your life, you know, like she doesn't want you to stop in your tracks. So I really think I might recommend this book to her, honestly. Like this book is just, it's so good. Like it actually feels like what teenagers are. Like it's not fluff. It's not everything is fine. It's like sometimes things are fun and sometimes they're not. You might do good for a while and then all of a sudden you're not. So I really thank you for writing this book, honestly.
Gosh, thank you so much. And yeah, that, I mean, it's true to what I've experienced in my life. And I also talked to some people who in my life have had, you know, slightly closer to what exactly happens in the book. And one of the things that was so common in that experience is that like every emotion you have is wrong. If you're sad, you're wallowing in it. If you're happy, you're moving on too quickly. If you're angry, you're doing exactly what your therapist said you were gonna. Like every single emotion that you have in that journey comes with this sort of like judgment that this isn't where I should be, or this isn't. And I remember I had a cousin who was my exact age, and we started everything to, I think we like smoked our first cigarette together when we were way too young to be doing that. And he died of addiction. And I just remember when I would start like reaching new life milestones, feeling so guilty, like that I got this and he didn't. And I think that just never goes away. And then the second thing that was so common was that like the myth of the linear progress path, that like day 2 you're going to be better than day 1, and year 3 you're going to be better than year 2. And I think, you know, for me and many of the people that I talk to, like the time, there's a line somewhere in the book that's like, it actually gets harder with time, because with time he gets farther away. And that is really hard, because it's like, okay, now we're really living, we're like, you know, photocopying the photocopied photocopy kind of thing, and everything is fading. Whereas more close to it, obviously the trauma and the pain was more visceral, but also so were the memories. So yeah, I just, you know, I wanted, and that was another, is like, I wanted this kid to really be in it and to not, I mean, he gets better, but he also doesn't, and he never will, but he already is. Like all of these are true at the same time. And I think that is like super true of people who have gone through something sad like this, which is so many people. Yeah.
Just validate all that, because grief is one of my specialties as a therapist. And when you were talking about, you know, everything you do is wrong. Well, and you also get external people going, I think you should be over that by now. You should be getting over it. And people say that like at funerals. So what I figured out, and this is just my own thing, but what I figured out is people say that stupid stuff when they want you to stop feeling bad because it's making them feel bad. Your grief is making me uncomfortable, so could you just stop now? No, you don't ever have to stop if you don't want to.
Right.
You know, it just looks different.
Yes.
I'm just telling you, you did what you wanted to do, was put him in it. And kids will always, on some level, blame themselves. What could I have done? Because they're not complete grown-ups yet, and they're not going to go, well, I did the best I could. You know, they're not there yet.
Alcoholism is a disease.
Yeah, too bad. So sad. Now what are we gonna have for supper? No, I mean, they take on more guilt than some adults do, just in my own experience. So let me just say from my professional point of view that you did what you set out to do, if that was your goal.
Thank you. Yeah,
I tell you, no, I wouldn't lie.
I know. Yeah, and I think, you know, or at least when I was a kid, and definitely Mark, you're a little bit more, hopefully more. There's not a guarantee that you become less self-centered as you get older, but I did. And I think, I mean, I do think that it's common when you're younger to just think to be a little bit more like and they even have studies of like really little children that, you know, really do think that, you know, the sun sets around them and that kind of thing. And so I think I intentionally made him like a little very, you know, a bit self-obsessed in the beginning. And then in the grief context, that does translate to, you know, a lot of guilt, but also, like you said, like if you pretend you're over it before you're over it, you'll definitely never get over it. And if you think that you could be over it, then you probably won't be over it because you'll never be over it. And just all of those, yeah. And I was really, there are a lot of therapy scenes in it, which, you know, meant a lot to me. And it was important to me to try to include like full sessions whenever possible. I mean, narratives need arcs and people you need things to keep happening. But I was big on like, I want this to feel not the world, it doesn't have to be the, you know, the world's greatest therapist, but I want this to feel like a real therapist and this to feel like a real therapy session.
Human beings, you know, it's really hard to, because there's a stereotype about us, you know, so it's that what I'm saying is that's hard to do, but you did it. So, you know,
Like the best day of my life.
well, that's the point.
Yeah.
Well, and also the resistance to therapy, because there's a stigma, like I don't need this. And when a tragic event like that has happened, I think it's more common to seek therapy, but then the need to go to that, I don't remember how many sessions it was many, but the need to normalize therapy even months and months and months after it's happened,
Yeah.
or you know, when I was coming out and going through separation, divorce, and breakups and all that stuff, I would go to my therapist. And then I've got children, and my oldest daughter, when I moved back to town, was like, "So, do you have a therapist now?" And I was like, "Well, I don't, you know, I'm feeling okay now." And she's like, "You need to find a therapist." So I'm like, "You're right." So I had one for a little while. So we're still looking to find a good fit, but normalizing the need for therapy in times of right after, and then to manage.
Yeah.
If you have the opportunity, I call it a tune-up. You know, come on back 2 years later if you just want to run some, you know what I mean? I like to think of myself as a support, part of a support for people who are going through things like that. And it's also important to have non-therapist people as your support system too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And one of the like little elements of the book that is like super minor because it's defined by it not happening, but Mark has to get, his mom, you know, makes him go to 3 therapy sessions. And then he obviously goes to many, 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 many more therapy sessions. He never consciously says, I want to keep doing therapy. And, you know, his family is Midwestern enough where they don't like sit down and be like, so how's therapy going? But he keeps going to what, you know, at some point I made a calendar of how many sessions, you know, probably 100 sessions by the end of the book. So yeah, I wanted him to not acknowledge, but obviously acknowledge that this was working and he was liking it more than he thought he would.
It's not what he thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and almost anyone who's gone to or had a good experience in therapy has been surprised by it. And the only, just a little fun fact, the only real name in the book is the therapist. And it was my homage to when I was a misbehaving college student. I was sentenced to a substance abuse counselor, and his name was Dr. Amato. And so the only real name in the book is Dr. Amato, because I thought that would be like a loving, because I was not in the right space for therapy at the time, but he healed me in ways that then became clear later.
That's how it works.
Yeah, right. I mean, it is amazing to look back on, but like he like planted these seeds, and I was super resistant. So I'm actually confused even how they got planted, because I was, you know, trying to be a wall, but they got planted somehow. And, you know, a little bit after college, that's when it all stopped.
I'm glad you did.
Yes, me too.
That's what I really liked that too, because I work with the same age group that like Mark is. So when I
Mhm.
even suggest therapy, they're like, I'll go if you're making me. And I'm like, I'm not making you. This is your decision. If you'll at least try it for me and I check back with you and you hate it, I'll talk to your therapist myself and tell them you want to quit. You know, like it's not
Totally.
something I'm gonna make you do. But you know, after a month or two, I'm like, oh, I thought you wanted to quit. And they're like, no, it's actually not that bad. And I was like, see, like you just it's
Totally.
so much built up with like that age group. It's like all in your head, and it's the same, you know, where we live in like a rural area. So like when I ask families how therapy's going, they're like, I don't know, I drop them off and pick them up. And I'm like, okay. So like I don't
Yeah.
really know sometimes if it's working, but I do feel good that at least I check in and see like if it's going well or not. And I always tell them like it's not a one and done. If you need this later, I will do another referral for you, you know, in a year or two, you might need it again, even if you met all of your therapy goals. Like it's not something that just goes away. So I think seeing someone like realistic like this in a young adult book will really like hit home, honestly, and be like, wow,
Mhm.
like that I'm not crazy. Like other people think this too.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes someone making you do it gives you the permission, and kind of like as a kid helps you save face. Like I'm sure
It
Mark,
does.
even on the 27th session, he would probably in some scene that's not written say to Damien like, oh, I gotta go to my therapist, my mom makes me go. Like it allows you to kind of save your dignity. And I think depending on where you're from, I mean, I remember when I went to college and I met people who were from New York City. And to me, I was like, whoa, people like actually live in New York City. And they went to therapy, and they talked about going to therapy the way that someone would talk about going to the gym. They would be like, oh yeah, I'm going to my therapist. And in my head, I'd be like, well, what's wrong with you? Like the only reason you go to therapy is if like you're a real lost cause, or that you have some very specific problem that needs to be fixed the same way that you would go to a doctor or something. And so has been interesting as an adult to be exposed to, I mean, kind of cultures where therapy is a little bit more just, oh yeah, this is like what, you know, a healthy, well-adjusted person still goes to therapy once a week because that's what keeps them healthy and well-adjusted. It's not just for, you know, severe instances, which I found very, very interesting.
And then there's that whole, like, for queer people, like finding the right person who there's going to be no, you know, conversion. Obviously conversion would be dramatic, but
Right.
just the right therapist that's, I don't know, that I did some church work before in my chapter 1 in my life. And so as I was starting to seek therapists, people would, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anyone's faith, but people would suggest faith-based counseling. And I was really worried about that because I felt like it would be more of a judgment zone. And that may be just my own bias, but I was glad to have found a secular therapist who was a straight man who was recommended by a friend of mine who big time drag queen around here. And all of this makes me bring up the fact of drag as therapy as well too, because in March of 2020, I was cast to play the role of Brother Boy. And I don't know if people know the movie Sordid Lives, which is Leslie Jordan, who was the actor who recently passed away, played a role of Brother Boy about a family in the South that was raised in church, and there was a gay brother who was institutionalized for being gay. And so he went through his phases of drag as his favorite country music singers. So he was going through his Tammy Wynette phase. So the play opens with Brother Boy in conversion therapy. So we were supposed to open in drag, in full drag. So we were supposed to open in March of 2020. And so I had been on stage a lot, but never in drag. And so I had makeup and wigs and dresses and high heels and was practicing walking in high heels. And then we were shut down and we didn't get to do the show. So that's when I, in lockdown, went on TikTok and started creating on TikTok. I was like, we got to have an audience. I've got to get this out. And so and then as a teacher, I also had characters like Miss Administration that I did for my students and Misalignment. And so, yeah. So, and I loved that part of the book with, you know, not like I am going to do drag for therapy, but just the way it sort of worked out is finding that as a way to get through the terrible things that I was, you know, experiencing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And I need to find your TikTok. Yeah, I definitely wanted to show like the healing power of drag. And I wanted it to heal a problem that didn't have anything to do with his sexuality also, because just for me, I was like, that will show that it really is like, because in my own life, like, of course, it's helped me come to terms and embrace all sides of my identity and my femininity and the things that you might expect drag to do. But it has also become this like like healing things that really, to me, seem to have nothing to do with sexuality. And so I kind of wanted to give drag this, and it's just so beautiful. And anytime you're more authentic and connect with yourself, it just starts healing you. And yeah, the healing power of drag is, and I do have the great fortune of knowing a lot of drag queens, and they all talk about like just how it just kind of starts to fix you.
Well, you're really good at it, my friend. Just Bagshaw. What? Don't talk to me. Those big old flowers and stuff, you.
Oh, thank you. Actually, they're
No, I love it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that was like really important to see too, because a lot of people have all these connotations of what they think drag is, but honestly, it's just like a way to be more yourself. Like it's nothing to do with sexuality or, you know, like anything like that. It's just me being more me. So I did like seeing that, because a lot of people just have all these connotations, and, you know, like once like me and my husband started being around the drag community more, it just hit closer to us. It's like I just feel more of myself. That's it. Like it has nothing to do with whatever other people think. So I think it's beautiful to see like people blossom in drag. Like they just do things that you never even thought they could do.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, drag is the best. Like, and it's so, there's so many, anytime somebody makes the like declarative statement about drag, it's like it's like saying something about painting. Like painting is explicit. It's like, well, if you paint a nude picture, I guess that's explicit, but paint, like drag isn't anything. Drag, like, of course you go to drag shows that you would not bring a child to, but you would also go to, so it's like, I
Right,
wanted to.
it's just art and expression, like, you know, it's
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
you know, there's different audiences for all kinds of art, same with drag, like.
Totally. Yes, my favorite quote of all time, "We're all born naked, the rest is drag." Yeah, I was actually at a bar a couple nights ago trying to convince this finance person in New York how his Patagonia vest was also drag. And I think I did convince him. He wasn't like a resistant audience. He was just confused. He was like, "What are you, this isn't drag. It's
Yeah,
in
we
the
all
guys section."
perform. We all perform our identities.
Yeah.
It's just that we want to rank order the ones that are not deemed socially acceptable at the top of the list.
Yes.
And to be fair, there is a drag queen named Patagonia, so you weren't you weren't far off.
An iconic drag
I love
queen.
her so much.
She is so, and talk about brilliant, like, and raising awareness for a cause. I love her.
So Dan, do you think there's a relationship between, you know, two of your primary artistic modes of expression, that being drag and writing? What's the relationship there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I could not have written without drag first. Like, it had to be the sequence that it was in my life. Like, I started doing drag and then I started writing, because I needed somewhere to hide when I was first writing. Like, I needed, you know, because everything, I mean, if I were to read like early Carrie Dragshaw posts, they were 100% word for word things that were happening in my life, you know, like being ghosted by a guy or going through a breakup or wondering if you were too weird for the world and all these things. But I never would have articulated something like that, because it's like, oh my gosh, just deal with it, move on. And so having this character to hide behind, it kind of, I was able to like express things in ways and find a little bit of like creative self-expression. And then I learned like, whoa, this is amazing. Like, life is so much better when you're expressing your authentic self. And then that led me to just kind of voraciously pursue creative self-expression in all of its forms, which then led to writing. And writing fiction, at least, is very related to drag in my world view, because you have a character and there's a permission inside a character as well. You're able to push things to extremes that you might, like if I were writing a memoir or something, I would probably censor certain experiences and just, you know, minimize, like, I was sad, but I wasn't that sad. I was okay. Like, whereas when you're in fiction, like, you are, a character is kind of dragged for emotions. And so you can like take it to different extremes that you wouldn't necessarily if you were like writing for yourself. So I 100% view them. And then like when you're writing a scene, it's like you're putting on different wigs. It's like, okay, I got to put on Mark's wig, and then I got to put on Damien's wig, and then I got to put on Eric's wig, and they all have their different mannerisms. So I pretty much think they're like the same art form, except writing is probably a little more comfortable than drag. Drag involves a lot of heels and hot wigs.
That all sounds so joyous, and I love like the play and enthusiasm that you both bring to the page and to this conversation and in your drag performances.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was so fun. And there are kind of two schools of writing thought about developing characters. One is like, you think of a character and then you write their biography, and then this is where they were born and this is what they had for breakfast, and you kind of like do a character analysis. And then another school that like teachers will recommend is like you just throw them into scenarios. And that's what I did. And it was total, like, joy is exactly the word. It was so fun. I just wrote these like going nowhere 20-page scenes of like Mark and Eric hanging out in Mark's bedroom, and that to me was totally drag, because it's like, okay, put on Mark, and like, oh, this is what, he's going to be self-conscious about something, and he's going to, okay, put on Eric, he's going to be like actively not talking about himself and trying to fix whatever his brother's going through. And like it very much was, drag to me, or, also Sex and the City is a good lesson in character development, because the characters are so clearly defined, like exactly how Carrie would respond in a situation, which is totally different than Miranda would respond. And so having drag and in the Sex and the City world was also helpful with character development.
And the big Halloween costume party that they had to have the fake IDs for, like, that was just, I mean, all the costumes and we kept bumping into, we bumped into this person in this costume, and then on the porch, I love that scene of just, I mean, I was there at the party, and just seeing all the thing on the wall, the blood stain on the thing on the wall, and love that. I mean, that sounds to me sort of like putting people in a scene and just sort of seeing where it goes.
Totally.
Really cool.
Totally. Yeah. And like, it was by far one of my favorite scenes to write. And it also, like, I mean, this is obviously not a book about queer joy. It's about a book about a very, very sad thing. But I wanted to show like that feeling, and we've all, I think every queer has had it, where you just find a place and you're like, oh my God, like, I didn't even know like there were this, and sometimes it's superficial, but like, I didn't even know that many hot people existed. Like, I've been in this high school where there was one hot gay guy, and like now, oh my God, and like this is so fun. And like he meets these two like very confident guys who are also in drag and think that it's super fun. And that scene has another less famous RuPaul quote, but RuPaul has talked about how Halloween is silly, and if you want to like dress like a sexy nurse, you should just dress like a sexy nurse, like even not on Halloween. And so I just really wanted that to capture the just sort of joy of finding your future, even if you have to go back. And like the scene right after is, his therapist says, walk me through the day that he died, so he's like right back to his reality. But he just, I mean, we all had it. And even when I wasn't out in high school, but I just remember you would see like something on TV or like a picture somewhere, and you would be like, there's another way. I just have to how do I get there? And, thankfully he got there in reality. And there was a funny, because you listen to the audiobook, there was a funny audiobook moment, because I was very nervous when I was doing the voices of the swans. I was like, because they're very exaggerated voices, and they're very like, yes, queen drag voices. I was very nervous. And I said to like the audiobook director, I'm like, well, I'm just nervous that I'm like appropriating drag culture. And she was like, you're a drag queen. And I was like, oh, okay. that sensitivity training like hit a little too hard. I guess I can, yes, queen. So yeah, that was a very fun scene.
Yeah, and when I started doing drag on TikTok, I talked to my friends and I was like, I've never performed, so I feel like
Mm.
I shouldn't be doing this. And then I started hearing about bathroom drag, and I'm like, well, okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm in lockdown and I'm doing bathroom drag, and that's okay. And I just felt like I needed to keep getting permission to do it, and like I was going to be outed, like having
Yeah.
viral videos. I was like, well, he's not really a performer, so he doesn't deserve these
Totally.
viral videos because he doesn't really perform. So that was a worry of mine, but I'm still in that journey. And
Yeah, but I so get that. And there
Mhm.
was a time early in Carrie Dragshaw where I was about to do some event as Carrie Dragshaw that was going to have real drag queens at it. And I was at a party. And do you know the drag queen Milk? Milk was at this party, and I was not in drag, and Milk was. But I know Milk just through life. And so I was like talking to him and being like, I'm just so nervous. And at the time there was a drag song that was out. I think it was by, I forget who it was by, but the lyrics of the song were, if you're not in nails, you're not doing drag. If you're not in nails, you're not doing drag. Or like, if you're not wearing nails, you're not doing drag. If you're not wearing nails, you're not doing drag. And I wasn't wearing nails, and I wasn't planning on wearing nails for this drag thing the next day. And I was all in my head about it. I was like, can I just go to a regular manicure place and will they give me like women's nails? And I was just really stressed about it. And Milk like grabbed my shoulders and he was like, drag is whatever you want it to be. And it was such a, because Milk is fucking gorgeous and so cool and interesting. And but it just was this moment where it was like, oh, yes, there's a certain style of drag that's been popularized, but that's not, and that would win you a competition. But that's not the only way to be a drag queen. And you can be a drag queen however you want to be a drag queen. And if your drag queen is just standing still or being on TikTok or writing, like it is whatever you want it to be. And that was such like a moment of permission. So yeah, I so relate to what you were saying.
Yeah, the imagery in this book was so good, especially it hit home because I have a lot of cousins who are like really close in age. We're either like a year or 2 years apart. And like when you and your brother were drinking around Thanksgiving and you hadn't drank as much as him, but you were like chasing him outside and being like, we have to go back home. We've been out forever and you haven't even been gone that long. That's literally happened to me. Like, you know, you leave the house and we're gonna go sneak out and do all this stuff. And like you're just in a panic because you're not doing as much as everyone else. So I think like that is the only reason I think like I didn't really delve into a lot of addictive behavior. I kind of caught it early in myself and I've struggled a lot with it. But seeing other people and growing up with them and losing people close to you over that and just, you know, it's hard. It is. So like I felt that too. But like you literally feel like you're gone forever and you've been gone 40 minutes. Like you're like, oh my God, we're past curfew. And it's like 9-10 o'clock. Like, oh my God.
And like everything is, that was another fun thing about writing young adult, because like writing anything, there's always this thing of like, what are the stakes? Like the stakes have to be high. And when you are a teenager, the stakes are always high. Like every second hour with your crush is like the biggest event imaginable. Or like some night where you're going out and like somebody's older sibling is getting alcohol, like the stakes are so high for every single thing that you're doing. Or even if you care about school, like what that one test is going to be the test that like if you get a B on this test, then you're going to get a B in the class, and if you get a B in the class, then your GPA is going to be lower, and then you're not going to get into the school you want to get into. Like everything is so high stakes. Even like just a fun little night out with your brother. And then also, like you were saying, like when you're kind of partying with people who are partying a little harder, there is also that moment, and I just so remember this growing up, when things take that turn and you're like, whoa, like we're not having fun this is really a little bit crazy. And am I being a loser by being scared about this, or is this person not okay, or is this just what happens? And I mean, I so remember so many, just little parties where your friend would be passed out and you'd be like, well, it does seem weird for someone to be unconscious. So that seems odd. But also, apparently, this happens. So maybe I'm being a wet blanket. And just like navigating that is, and everybody knows to like put someone on their side, but that's like the only thing that you know. So yeah, getting that where like it's fun until it's not.
Well, and in that scene where y'all are Google woo, you Google woo, I'm listening to it. I'm listening to the audiobook, and you were like talking drunk, and I could just picture it, but I could also, I got the turn. I got the second that it turned, and you related to me, is what I mean. I got it in your voice. I heard it. Do you know what am I making sense?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%.
It's really fun to listen to you do the different people. Was it fun for you?
It was so fun. It was so fun. It was a learning experience. Like on the first day, they had to stop the taping and they were like, okay, not all straight guys have the same voice. For every heterosexual man, I was just, whether they were 14 or his father, I was just being like, what are you doing here? Like just making them all like cavemen. So yeah, that was, and then it was like, yeah, the different characters like trying to capture their vibe, that was hard. But I also was really like, I don't think I've ever fought harder for something than for me to be the one who did the audiobook, just because there was something so specific that I wanted it to be. And like, this is a first person present tense book about losing someone. And so I knew that if a professional narrator did it, that night would have happened and they would have said, the mother screamed from the pit of her soul. And it's like, no, like I just wanted it to be, or needed it to be like that present tense. What is it actually like? And I had never heard that I love audiobooks, and I had never heard like an actual scream or actual crying. Like the professional narrations that I've heard have always kind of had like a distance from the material in a way that totally works in those books. And I absolutely love audiobooks, but I was like, I don't want this to have any distance. I want it to be as, abrupt and in the moment as it is in the actual book. So yeah, I was super happy that I was able to do it. And then it was a really kind of amazing, rewarding week to do it. And a very almost like there would be these moments where I would be describing what Mark was experiencing, like my hand was shaking and a single tear outlined my nose. and while that was happening, like my hand would be shaking and a single tear would outline my nose. And so it like got so eerie that I kind of thought in some like fantasy sci-fi way that like at the end of the 5 days of recording, I would somehow like just be living in the book. Like I would look around and be like,
Like
"That's
be
book?"
Patrick Swayze going into Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah, exactly. But it was the like most rewarding experience of my life that week. And a lot of the like how I wrote Mark's, it's like I'd read these articles about method acting. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if you could like method write. And so and this is a little bit crazy, but I was very intent on like making sure that I got the emotional experience correct, because this is a big emotion. And so I would like map out in my little apartment, like the funeral, and like, here's the altar and then I would be like, okay, so you're 17 years old, brother, your whole world just died, like, and now you're going to and I would like go to the funeral and have the experiences, and then also be like writing it down. And then I'd like run to the mirror and be like, oh, interesting. So when you cry, it kind of weighs down your lower eyelid. So it was this bizarre, like trying to actually feel it so that it came across as authentic, but then also needing to like record it. So then to perform it was kind of neat too.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it was like my number one rule for myself through the whole thing was like, tell it true. I had this huge Post-it note on my wall that was like, tell it true. Whether this is, even if it's the most boring book in the world, that doesn't matter to me as much as like, just tell it true, tell that emotional experience true. So yeah, kind of rambly about the process, but I
Oh, it's
enjoyed then bringing it to life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
can I
if-
just say, I did write this. I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
Go ahead, Sue. No, go ahead, Sue. I just have a great observation, but go ahead, share your story.
You go first and then I'll go.
I just want to say that when this comes to film and stage, you have to be the director, Dan, because
Mm.
the emotionality that went into the soul of this has to live in that way through you again, right?
Yeah.
And so that to me is very important.
Mm.
So you should insist on that, and I'm
Yeah.
going to say when, because I believe that since you birthed this, it will continue to bear fruit.
Mm.
And you insisted on getting what you wanted before, you might as well keep going.
Might as well keep, I know, I'm finding a whole new, I'm finding
That's
this Awshock Midwesterner is
a
finding
great idea. Get
power.
Kim Cattrall to be the punch bowl mama. Samantha. I was just gonna say I wrote this down because I just thought it was funny as I was going through. And you're just talking about, they were saying to, all straight guys don't talk the same way, but there is a voice that you needed to bring through that said, those leaves aren't gonna blow themselves on things.
Yeah.
It has to be the dad. And you got the dad voice. I about spit up my iced tea. Those don't blow themselves. Like he doesn't even know what he's
Yeah.
thinking. He doesn't know he doesn't know how the teenagers are gonna go.
Right. Yes. Oh, I love that.
Correct me up. But yeah, the movie.
I also wanted to shout out Nathan for putting a quote in the chat. Even the parts that you thought were broken, they somehow teach you to love. Oh,
Mhm.
that's so good. If anybody else has any favorite quotes. I would love to see them in the chat.
Well, mine wasn't that great. These leaves aren't going to blow themselves. I think
I'm really channeled my inner awkward dad for that one.
I thought when they went to see Waitress, surely we would have heard "You matter to me." But then they were like, yeah, but
Totally.
love Waitress. And
I do love Waitress.
Yeah.
Although I did this manuscript critique very early on, and there were a ton more like quotes from musicals and
mhm, mhm.
things like that. And the person, I actually don't even know if it's true, but it like happened early enough in the process where they got me scared of copyright for like
Mhm.
consent
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And so I think the only quotes that survived are like, you know, past their copyright or
And
like
then we
like,
chatted a little bit on Instagram about Rent references, which I mean, I saw original Broadway cast in 97, 6, 7, and then like it's like got a real special place for me. Rent does, so which I know it does a lot of people, but
Yeah.
all those connections were just like mhm.
you saw
No
Jesse
day but
L.
today.
Martin in person. I'm sorry I interrupted you. You saw Jesse L. Martin in person.
Just wow. Yeah.
Ed Green.
I mean, we could have a whole
I
other
know.
thing about my Rent stories. I have so many Rent stories, like meeting all the folks and like hanging out the stage door, and then like just part 2.
Part
Yes,
two.
and you'll have to come to Greensboro when you come to the
I
Carolinas. and
100%
you
will. Oh my
out
gosh.
to lunch and share the Rent stories and all the other stuff.
Love it.
We can go to Seal and Sco or one of those. Isn't that down there near you? Yes, we could do that.
For sure.
They are a Guilford Green Foundation Progress Partner.
Oh, that's right. I saw that. I forgot about that. Oh, and also they have the best shrimp and grits I ever made. And I lived for 20 years in Charleston. So at this point, I might know what I'm talking about.
Might be an expert on shrimp and grits.
Hey, it's a thing. Right?
I know.
Let me see if I have anything else. Those are all my questions.
Yeah, if anybody else has any questions, Sue, if you have any more thoughts, or anybody in the room right now, this would be a great time to ask Dan any remaining questions that you have burning.
Heather
That's-
just dropped an amazing quote in the chat too.
It is. You never get over it, you get used to it.
I
You
love that.
know, and it still hurts.
Yeah.
Don't wake up thinking that your stomach's going to fall out of your body. You know,
Yeah.
Our
My-
center director has been reading the book, and I hate she's not here, but she's heading out for a trip tomorrow, but we're texting back and forth about it. And I just wanted to lift up her joy in the scene where Damien and friends help Mark to buy the dress in the store because they buy. I mean, she just said that was a really beautiful moment for her, of many beautiful moments, but I just wanted to lift up how meaningful that was. That the love of friends helping each other like that.
Oh, amazing. Well, in that scene, I feel like it's relevant for, I'm sure, the type of work you do. But that scene was born out of, it was like in the editing process. And I wanted to give the friends like a little bit more of a role in the later half of the book. And it was also during the height of, so it was right after, I was editing it during the George Floyd, right after that, and there were a lot of Black Lives Matter protests in New York at the time, and as there were all over the place. And at one of the protests that I went to, they asked, and it was early, so people weren't really sure how the NYPD was going to be reacting, and there was just a little bit more anxiety than as things went on. And so people, I forget the specific phrase they used, but it was something along the lines of, we need the white people here, especially the white men, to use their privilege. And they asked, in a very respectful way, they asked the white men who were at this protest to march on the outside, and everyone else could be on the inside, because it would be less likely that somebody would, the logic they were expressing was that it would be less likely for a police officer to abuse a white person standing on the outside. And so that notion of like using your privilege, I had never heard that before. And it was really this like framework shifting idea for me professionally, personally, and all of these things. And so then I was like, oh, I bet Damien is the kind of friend who would find, like, how could he use his privilege of being like, he doesn't have any insecurities about somebody knowing that he would wear a dress. So how could he like use his privilege? But it was, I don't know, it was like a fun, I mean, not fun, but it was a moment where like real life in a completely, obviously completely different issues, but real life bled into the book a little bit in a concept that's now, I think, pretty commonly known, but at the time I had never heard it, and it really did change the way that I go about the world.
And that's another brilliant theme from this book, because young people who will read this need to know that their privilege is their superpower, right? Even when we feel we are unprivileged, we have some manner of privilege over or beyond the next person. And as a former teacher like Nathan, the one thing I wanted people to leave with, young people to leave with, is that use your superpower for good, right? Identify it and use it for good. So that is a universal message that I think all manner of young people will get when they pick this book up. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's how we're gonna make the world anew, envision another way forward.
Yes. Yeah, because we all have these different superpowers. And so if everyone uses the one that they have, then
I'm ready.
Stand a chance.
I'm ready. I'll get out front, I'll get beside you, or I'll get behind you. Your choice.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you. That's mine. I made that up by myself
I love that.
because I ain't scared. A life sentence don't mean nothing to me anymore. I'll catch a charge.
That's amazing.
Well, it seems like things are wrapping up. I think it's a pretty good place to begin our checkout, if that's okay with everybody. I won't pull back up the PowerPoint because I love connecting with y'all, seeing everybody's face, all of that good stuff. But so for checkout, thank you for the heart, Dan. Share 1 or 2 words to describe what you are taking away from our discussion today. And then we can say our goodbyes to Dan, but this has been so great already. Thank you all for coming. But, oh my gosh, I will just say drag and joy. Those are my 2 words.
I will add to that and say queer joy, really.
I'll go drag and love.
I'm going to bookend sort of what I started with is, you know, going into the coming of age young love thing. is I came away powerfully surprised.
Oh, oh, snap. That's lovely.
Well, I will just leave it at one, which is just gratitude for this conversation. It really, I mean, writing a book takes a long time, or it took a long time. I don't know if it always does, but it did for me. And there was a very specific thing that kind of kept me through the, because invariably there's rejection and doubt and all these things. And I just dreamed of like maybe one day, one person would pick this up and like read it seriously, like, and take it seriously and read it like a real book and underline things. And so to have this conversation, it really just means the absolute world to me. It's like it is a literal dream come true. So I'm just very, very grateful for the time.
Well, thanks for taking yours with us. I'm so glad to see you.
I know, same.
I'm coming to New York in January.
I'll be
I'll
there.
miss. It's a knit.
And I have a scarf.
Yeah, it'll be cold. You do.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, Dan. Yeah, I am just so grateful that you shared your brilliant words with us and your brilliant brain with us, and some of the recording process of the audiobook and the writing process. This was such a rich and invigorating and kind conversation that I'm so grateful I've been a part of. So thank you again.
Thank you. And I'll